You are not only competing against your competitors, but you are competing against all the other types of content that is fighting for the attention of your target audience. And that's why storytelling is so essential. If you just mention your features and the reasons and the USPs of your offer, it's boring. It's not enough to stand out. But with the storytelling in marketing, you can build relationship with your target audience. You can create a soul of your business. And that's ultimately what people want. They don't want to buy from anonymous companies. They want to feel emotions about the companies they are buying from. They want to rely on them. They want to trust them. And storytelling makes companies more human. I've been using storytelling in marketing for 5 years. And to dive even deeper into that topic, I also invited a copywriter who has been writing for 28 years, Mike Garner. I'm going to show you the interview where we talked about the storytelling in marketing. But before I show you the interview, I will summarize the most important takeaways for me. Not everyone understands what actually storytelling in marketing is. Let's explain it in a few examples. Imagine you have a software for accounting, which seems a little bit boring, but makes a good example for that case. Instead of saying our solution has those and those features, you can do this and those things, you could say something like, with our solution, you free up 3 hours every week. We have created this solution because we ourselves have been struggling with accounting and have lost a lot of money and got a lot of headache just because we didn't have the right solution. This is one example of storytelling. You make it personal. You also focus more on the transformation of the life of the person who you're targeting, because everyone is interested in how your solution is going to improve their life, either in business or in personal life, but everyone is only focused on their advantage. And for them, it doesn't matter if your software has 100 different features or it has only 5 different features. It's only matter if they will live a better life with your solution. There are, of course, many different ways to create stories. You can use your clients, or you can use your failures experience, your founding stories. Important is just to understand that, first of all, everyone has a story to tell, no matter how boring your story seems to be to yourself. For others, it might be much more interesting and exciting. How to start with storytelling in marketing as a founder? Even if you might think you don't have an interesting story, with the right technique, you might find really interesting, incredible, emotional stories. So first of all, write down everything that comes to your mind. Just brainstorm. How did you found your startup? Why did you found? Which is a very important question. Why? What were your motivations? What challenges did you face? And which mentors did you find? Write everything down that comes to your mind. Maybe even go back into your earlier years where you were dreaming of something like that. Or maybe you've seen those problems that others were struggling and they were telling you about that. And then you decided to create the solution. A good idea is also just to talk with other people, maybe your friends or a coach or your family, and to tell the stories from your perspective. Because what seems to be totally normal for you might feel extraordinary for other people. When you wrote everything down, now you can put it in different buckets. You have to understand what are important things for your target audience. For example, maybe they are really all about saving money. And maybe certain stories that you wrote down are showing how important it is for you. Or simplicity. Maybe you discovered how important simplicity is in the early age, or your customers are so amazed about the simplicity of your solution that they are using it very efficiently and so excited about that. So you pick some stories and connect them with the values of your target audience. Look especially for transformative stories where you were in a bad place or unsatisfied place, and then you did something and then you achieved the goal. And especially if it's the same transformation that the target audience wants, then the target audience will feel like they are part of your journey because they have the same problem. Let's imagine you have created a few stories and now you are wondering how to use them in your marketing. One place is the landing page or the website. There, instead of just focusing on the features, you can make a flow kind of. On the top of the website, you can talk about the problems that your target audience have and your solution and the transformation. How will their life change after using your solution? It's a complete change of how you approach your website, how you approach your marketing communication. And then you always focus on the whole website. You are focusing on the target audience as the hero that you are guiding through. Not your website, not your software is the hero. That's only the guidance towards the transformation. And based on that, you can create content for social media, for emails, and you have always the North Star. You understand what are the biggest problems that your target audience has and what kind of solution you are offering and what kind of transformation. And that will be represented in all of your communication. And of course, you can always add some other stuff, so it's not repetitive, but the core of your communication strategy can contain those transformations. You can also use stories from your clients, from news, from your own life, maybe even from your team members. There are many possibilities. Important is that you don't use different problems and transformations in your marketing channels. The goal is to contact the right people several times from different channels. And if you contact them about different transformations, then there is no clarity. They wouldn't understand what your brand is standing for. But if your messaging is on the same level, you are always focusing on the same problems and solutions and transformations, then there is a clarity and you build a brand that people associate with that transformation. And now some advice on how to use storytelling in marketing. The stories start with empathy. Think about the biggest fears, frustrations, or pains of your target audience. For example, we have been wasting several hours a week for accounting, and now we only need 1 hour a month for all of the accounting tasks. And we feel in more control about our accounting and worry less about it. Imagine if you are the person with the same problems, how you would react to that statement. It would feel like the person knows your pain and it's exactly the right place for you to be. And remember, you are not selling a solution, a software. You are selling confidence. You are selling more time, more money. So there is always a transformation that you are actually selling. And for the client, for the prospect, it doesn't matter how to get to that. It just needs to be believable and trustworthy. And don't try to be perfect. It's not about perfect grammar, perfect writing, perfect story. It's about to be authentic and human. Of course, you can improve your writing with AI, but be careful with AI solutions that they don't remove the soul of the story. AI can create pretty nice texts that feel empty, feel boring. And the internet is full of boring, empty content, soulless content. If you are struggling to create a story for your business, please add your website in the comments below and I will give you a few inspirations. And now we will dive even deeper in the topic of storytelling in marketing. Could you tell me a little bit about your specialty in storytelling and why it's important and how much potential it has for startups, especially software startups, SaaS startups?
I'm a copywriter. I've been a translator in the past. And I came to it through a succession of kind of life-changing events, probably over COVID. I lost my mother to Alzheimer's and my wife had breast cancer. She's fine now, but 2020 was quite a year for lots of other reasons. And I suddenly realized that I was the wrong side of 60. My mother was 26 when I was born. What are you going to do with the rest of your life? And through a series of events as well, I realized that I had a story to tell. Because the vast majority of us live our lives in our own humdrum kind of way. We think our lives are boring because they are our lives, because they are our everydays. I would almost guarantee that someone like Lewis Hamilton thinks his life is boring as well, even if he's going around 200 miles, going around hairpin bends at 200 miles an hour all the time. It's his every day. It's what he does all the time. So he's just used to it. And it's the same for everybody as well. But the thing is that there's 2 points I want to make there. Your story is the only thing you've got which is truly unique. It is the only thing that no one can take from you. It is the only thing that no one can imitate. And while you may think your circumstances are boring, not everybody else thinks that. Take the example of Lewis Hamilton or anybody else. The things that you think are boring are every day. They could well be somebody else's extraordinary. You have things to teach other people that only you can teach. Everybody has that. One thing I like to say is, and I know this is not software companies, but how do you tell the difference between two accountants? They have exactly the same product. A balance sheet is a balance sheet. Why do you go to one rather than the other? Because of how they are, because of what they stand for, because of the stories they tell. Because some of them do. Some of them are interesting. It is the only thing you've got which is truly unique.
Yeah, it's not easy to stand out nowadays in the crowded markets. Most of the markets, you can be replaced by other solutions. They are oftentimes alternatives. Even if you don't have the exact competitors, there is just competitors to your audience, to their ears, to their attention. If you have normal content that the same as everyone else, it's almost mission impossible to stand out.
It is, because I think a lot of businesses, and I'm not necessarily signaling out software companies here, they talk about what they do all the time. And to be quite frank, no one cares. People are selfish. They want to know, can you solve my problem? And too many businesses just don't talk about outcomes. They talk about, oh, we've got this wonderful widget, or look at all the wonderful technical things it can do. Software companies are slightly guilty of that as well. They do, oh, we've got this and this and this. If it doesn't relate to the problem that I have, I don't care. Copywriters love to say that in the content that we produce, we are joining the conversation your prospect is already having in their heads. If you're only talking about the solution and not the actual problem, you're going to miss the mark completely. It's going to go straight over their heads. That's the one thing. And the other thing is, coming back to my accountant's analogy, if you've got two solutions that are more or less the same, then there's going to be the likability factors that kick in. Why do people trust a brand like Apple? They basically fall in love with it because of who they are, because of what they do, because of those kind of things. They know the experience they're going to get. So set your expectations, part of which is with your stories, with the customer journey. I wonder sometimes how many businesses really have a look at customer journey and work out what their customers are actually going to experience when they work with them. Incredible amount of software solutions will let you sign up and leave you in the ether with nothing. There's no kind of, not even a welcome sequence of emails. There's no kind of regular check-ins. And I noticed it because it's the kind of thing I do. I notice it when I sign up for something, not just software companies, but other things. And you don't hear from them for a week. And even worse, you finish your free trial and that credit card debit comes off and you say, what the hell's this? And you've completely forgotten about that thing you signed up for a month ago because they haven't been in touch with you. And that is, again, it's part of telling your own story. That customer journey, it's not just what you had for breakfast and stuff like that. You do use personal stuff, but as an aside, the only businesses should be telling you what they had for breakfast are businesses in the food business. That's where it's delivered. But there are all kinds of things you can say about why you do what you do, what the reasons for the startup. You tell stories about what happens during the days. There's lots of brands that do that, but in an inclusive way. You used to see lots of people on LinkedIn saying, oh, we were at this award ceremony. Aren't we have a wonderful time, but you're not here. do it in a way that it includes the audience rather than excludes the audience. That is kind of really important as well. It's how do you get your audience involved in your, so they think they own a part of it. That's the kind of the El Dorado, if you like, that people fall in love with brands because they kind of think they own part of that brand. They're emotionally invested in it. Whereas if you're seen just as a commodity, then you're on a loser.
You touched on many interesting things that probably for us, they are kind of intuitive and clear, but for many of our audience might not be very clear. We could either explore those areas like customer journey and storytelling, how it can also be a little bit abstract. It's not clear to everyone. We can explore it with some user cases from your clients, or we could simulate that I am your client and in a consultancy and we have some concrete ideas.
I mean, basically, the customer journey is imagining what your customer feels and in what situation is before they even know of you, taking it through the various stages of awareness to what they are like when they bought the product and they are using the product. It all comes down to where is the transformation. On a simple level, you go to a restaurant, you are hungry. You eat your food, you are no longer hungry. So you are satisfied, you are happy. In very simple terms, that's what a customer journey is.
So let's imagine I created an accounting software.
I asked for that, didn't I?
Or I can use a different example, or I can use one of your clients.
Because accounting software is a particularly dry subject.
Yes, or let's say I created, for example, a marketing software to publish posts on LinkedIn or something like that, or whatever you feel more comfortable with.
I'll tell you what, if we can go back to the accounting software, because I think QuickBooks is a good example. Because all their advertising puts people in the driving seat. They show, and Xero does it as well, but I think QuickBooks does it better, that they show people using the software. That's, in fact, what Apple does as well. They don't talk about features and benefits. They talk about experience. And that's what, particularly these days, that's what we all crave, is what would my life be like if I did that, if I signed up with it? And that's how people learn to perhaps fall in love with the brand, is a little bit of an exaggeration, but certainly trust a brand like QuickBooks or Xero. I mean, they're the biggest ones. People trust a brand because they're invested in them. To ask the question you haven't asked yet, I would kind of start with the journey that brought you to where you are now, why you do what you do. They're probably interlinked, the two. And then where is the transformation? What is it like for people to use your product? And you weave the stories in. LinkedIn is probably as good as an example as anything. A good example for that is to use case studies.
Yes.
Testimonials. Because you can say what you like about your product, and you must, obviously, but what somebody else says about you is worth 10 times more, whatever you say. Particularly, I mean, over the last 20 years, I mean, eBay's and Amazon's business has been grown as basically, it still depends on what everybody else says about your product, which is not something that used to happen 30 or 40 years ago. That's the big change that the internet has made to marketing, is that kind of user-generated opinions, to invent a word, is driving everything.
If everyone is talking about how great their product is or service, then everyone can say anything about his product. It's so much less trustworthy than...
People do not trust brands as a general rule, unless you do something to earn it. There's famous brands right across the world. I mean, I'm just thinking of Patagonia and people like that. I mean, Patagonia is a case study in how to do brand strategy. There are a number of brands in the UK, I mean, Innocent Drinks and people like that, are great at just storytelling. You know, they tell stories of people in their office and the photocopier and things like that. It's kind of small little details that just make you human. I think that's what it comes down to. How can I be more human? And people are terrified by that as well, because there used to be kind of this thing on LinkedIn a few years ago, whereas you had to be kind of professional, in inverted commas. And that's not what people are looking for. They're looking for this human touch. And again, it's not about talking about all your problems and everything all over. It's just talking about some of the humdrum things that we do that just make us normal. Why do people watch soap operas so much? Because it is basically, and apart from the kind of the flare-ups and things, the run-of-the-mill things in soap operas is just boring everyday life. But people can relate to that because it's like their lives. That's why they get invested in it, because it is boring.
Let's go step by step. If I have a startup and I want to use storytelling, what would be the first step? And maybe even accounting software is not that bad, because people might think about their business right now who are listening and say, it's easy to create a storytelling for Apple or for cool companies. But my own company is so serious. It's targeting maybe some kind of directors, and I don't need storytelling. But if we are able to explain it in accounting software, then everyone can use storytelling.
I think so, yeah. And I think it does come back to the old thing about joining the conversation your customer is already having in their head, or your prospect is already having in their head. Now, that involves a certain amount of research because you need to know what they're thinking. There's lots of ways of doing that. If nothing else, just looking at book reviews on Amazon, seeing what people are saying. On that kind of level, you go out and interview potential customers, for example. Once you've got that information, I mean, if you are your ideal client anyway, you can perhaps shortcut it because you know the problems, you know what they're thinking, and you use that as the basis. And the stories are going to be, I mean, you can use case studies or testimonials and things like that, but also just talk about what it's like using your piece of software by showing how it solves the problems that your potential customers have, not by saying it does this and this. I mean, to use a kind of computer, they don't do it so much now, but there was a chain of computer shops in the UK 10 or 15 years ago, used to just run through all the product specifications. It's got so much RAM, it's got so much, and all this. And it worked for them because their audience, that was what ticked the buttons of their audience. But it didn't tell me what I could do. It didn't tell me I could write a book with a PC. It didn't tell me what I could do with it. So coming back to the accountancy software, it'll do your accounts. It'll give you your balance sheet, your profit and loss and stuff like that. No one buys a piece of accounting software because it can do profit and loss. Because any piece of accountware can do profit and loss. You do a piece of accounting software, I would suggest, for example, because it's easy to use. Because it means you can spend more time doing the stuff that you want to do and stuff like that. The analogy I like to use is when you go to the garage to get your car fixed, you don't really care how it gets fixed unless you're a car nerd. You want to know that you can drive away with it and it be like it was before. You don't need to know the details. You need to know the outcome of what happens. I keep coming back to this, but so many businesses focus on what they do and not what the result is.
Okay, let's assume we understand our target audience really well. They are really, maybe in our case, it's important for them to simplify, like you said, because accounting is overcomplicated. And it's important to avoid mistakes. And also to simple avoid mistakes, because the target audience is maybe not accountants, but startup owners, and they are not experts. So there should be some help and some guidance. And what would be the next step? And also, I really liked the approach that you explained before this episode, how to find stories, interesting stories in your life, in your personal.
Yes, the approach that I have really works for solopreneurs, but I think it could work for a team as well. But you'd have to adapt it slightly. If you want to know the stories that are relevant in your own life, sit down with a big piece of paper or a spreadsheet, or when I use a Trello board, but you divide your life into small chunks. Let's say 5 years, because it's a nice, convenient thing. And I'm including your school years here as well. You could perhaps use your school years as the first 15 years or 20 years of your life as one unit, because that's the time when you're learning the most. And you think about what you were doing at that time. Who were your mentors? What did you learn? Who were your enemies? And stuff like that. This takes time because, particularly if you're like me and you've got lots of years, you're going to know the outline stuff when you had your first job, when you left school and stuff like that, or the various kind of changes that you had. But that's going to trigger other things, the details that are going to come up. The important parts often in anyone's life are the moments of change, the transformation. That's what stories are. Now, there's two advantages to that. Not only would it give you a massive bank of stories, because what I forgot to tell you earlier was you will see trends. I'm a copywriter now. I've been a translator. Before, I was a travel agent in Paris, business travel. So that's when I learned how to build relationships. Before that, I've got a degree in history. I did my degree in history in 1981. But that's when I learned to connect things together, see trends, interpret things. I could take it right back to when I was a kid, because I used to go to Spain because my father worked for the railways and we got cheap holidays to go to Spain. That's when I was 5 or 6 or 7, saw other people speaking in other languages. And that's stayed with me the rest of my life. There are things that are going to have happened 20 years ago when you were at school that are important, that are relevant to what you do now. So you're going to see trends and you're going to identify those trends. It's almost guaranteed that you will find something you didn't think of before. So it'll give you a massive bank of stories to use, but also it'll poke in the eye that notion that you've done nothing particular in your life. Because when I thought, crikey, I've done all that. And somebody else had to point it out to me, unfortunately, because it is quite difficult. This comes with a caveat. It is quite difficult to do on your own. If you could do it with somebody, that analysis part, if you could do it with somebody else to whom you are not related and with whom you are not in a romantic relationship, because they are too close to you. So don't do it with your wife. Don't do it with your sister. Do it with someone who knows you little enough or well enough to be a little bit critical of you, and to be able to stand back from your life. Now, it's a bit more difficult to do for a team, but you can do that, again, probably with outside help, because you've got different dynamics, obviously, because there's more people. But you can do it as well. And you could do it just on the lifetime of the business. You sit down and say, right, what is our founder's story? Why the hell are we doing this in the first place? Hewlett-Packard, even to this day, make an awful lot of the fact that it started in a garage. So did Apple as well. A lot of Silicon Valley companies started like that. Google used to make something of the fact that the spelling of the word Google is a misspelling, because it's a goggle, isn't it? A gogol, as it were. I'm not quite sure the maths of it, but it's a mathematical expression, isn't it? And it got misspelled. That is part of an origin story. And I think it's really important, if you want to build a brand, is to have an origin story, particularly if you're a small startup. And once you get to the size of QuickBooks or whatever, it becomes less important. But once you're building momentum, then I think people buy into those origin stories.
That's a good approach. What happens if I have several co-founders? Should we use one of the co-founders' story?
I think you can use them all, because they're a collective. They become a collective identity, and they become a story as a collective story. There's a notion of, I don't want to get kind of too technical here, but a company exists as an entity. It's not a physical thing. It's they have an identity. It's a collective identity, and it's the collective identity of all the founders. Now, that what the individual founders did as generally, Microsoft is a good example, actually. Bill Gates' founding story about he's spending all the computer downtime coding. That is part of Bill Gates' story, and it's part of Microsoft's story as well. And the relationship between Gates and Paul Allen and all the others. Apple as well. The relationship between Steve Jobs and Woz. They're two individual people, but they form a whole. They form a collective whole in the company. It's a different dynamic, but it can work just as well.
Did you have clients that came to you and said, I don't know, I don't have any story? And then you create...
Practically all of them do. And then we kind of go into it. And I've got a really good example of that, just very quickly. It's a solopreneur who is an HR consultant. She's got an origin story. She's South African of Indian origin. She grew up in South Africa in the 80s on the wrong side of the fence. So that obviously formed part of her origin story, part of her principles. She told me 1-2 stories of working in post-apartheid after 1994 and the kind of problems that a lot of people had putting that together. Then she moved to London. She works with scale-up companies, people that are just starting to take on new staff. We worked out their ideal client was the kind of business that was scared about letting new people into the company because they might lose the spirit of the company and things like that. And I said to her, look, your ideal client, she's in her 50s. She's not only a strategist, because she does all the HR stuff, she's also a mentor, because again, of that age gap. The transformation in her business and the way she thought about her business, because she realized she had that origin story. There's wonderful moments when you're sitting on a Zoom screen and you see kind of light coming to people's eyes. To be frank, she burst into tears, but happy tears. But that is the kind of transformation, this realization that, it happened to me, this realization that we all have something worthwhile saying. If I can just give you one very quick anecdote. Neil Gaiman, who is no slouch in terms of achieving things himself, was at a meeting of the great and good. It was a Lifetime Achievement Award type thing, full of Nobel Prize winners. And he was thinking, what have I done? I've done nothing special. Apart from selling a few million books, Neil, you've done nothing special, no. And he got talking to this little old man, as he called him, also called Neil. They bonded over their shared first name and everything. And he was saying the same thing. Done nothing special. Just went where I was told to go. What's remarkable in that? That little old man who'd done nothing special was Neil Armstrong. So if Neil Armstrong can feel that he's done nothing special, I think there's hope for us all.
So you realized with this user case that you mentioned that actually in how she grew up, how she built her company, probably there is quite some stories, some unique story.
That's where all her principles come from. It also informs how she does her work. And 9 times out of 10, that's the case. People come to me and say, or they think there's something in there, but I'm not quite sure how to say it. And age, I mean, she was a bit older, but I worked with people in their 20s with the same kind of thing as well. There's obviously less material to work with when the younger you are, the more difficult it is. But generally, people think they are insignificant. It's a survival mechanism. It's a natural human thing, but it's kind of the same for everybody.
So we have now several stories. What would be the next step?
To write them down. Write them down. Not just write them down. Use any kind of medium that's appropriate. I say write them down because I'm a writer. I do video as well. Work with content creators, basically.
Shouldn't I filter out according to certain criteria, or should I just use all of those stories?
You would want to come up with themes, buckets of content, if you like. There needs to be you're not going to be throwing stories out randomly. You need to sit down and think, right, what do I want from this? I mean, the obvious thing is you want to attract ideal clients. You need to work out who your ideal clients are. The one-on-one of this is work out what you're selling, who you're selling to, and what you bring to the party. And what you bring to the party is a story. Imagine a Venn diagram. On one side, you've got your prospect, all their hopes and fears, all the things they want and stuff like that. On the other side, you've got your backstory, or your product and the features and the benefits and all this stuff. What you talk about is the bit in the middle. It's where you meet your clients' hopes, fears, and aspirations and whatever. So in practical terms, you would work that out. You would work out the questions you need to answer and tailor your content accordingly. I mean, it's often just a mix between storytelling and information, just giving information, because that's important as well. It's not all storytelling. Storytelling, information, and pitching. There's no hard and fast rule about how much you should pitch. I would probably say do it 80-20. Do it 80% storytelling and information giving and 20% pitching, because you do have to pitch as well.
So each story should be connected to the needs of the target audience. For example, in our case, it should be easy and avoiding mistakes. And maybe a story could be that you were doing your accounting and you made a huge mistake and then you had to pay a fine. Mm-hmm. And then that's where you realized you want to avoid the others shouldn't do that same mistake.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. You're touching on something which is a little bit kind of not contentious, but is using fear in advertising is always a double-edged sword. I tend to shy away a little bit from fear simply because in a business context, because I'm presuming most buyers will be business owners. There's an added context with business owner buying is that the easiest solution is to do nothing. And fear, inertia, inertia is the biggest force strongest force in the universe. And fear sometimes puts people off. I'd treat it on a case-by-case basis, really, like that. But the way to say, don't get a fine, there's going to be a different way of saying it. If it was me, it wouldn't be a motivator for me. I'd be far more motivated by having an easy life rather than...
Yes. So maybe I have been spending 4 hours every week for accounting as a business manager. And then I realize, okay, I hate those 4 hours. Should be a way to reduce that. And that's why I started a startup.
That is far more compelling than, well, what could you do with those other 3 hours? You go to the beach or whatever. I mean, it's time saving is a big seller.
Yeah. So this is one story. But then there might be some stories from my life that I was always entrepreneurial and my dream was to found startups and so on. Should I try to connect several stories to the needs of my target audience?
Well, yes, you can do. I mean, that would vary very much depending on the circumstances, but that's certainly part of your origin story, particularly if you started some weird thing when you were 15 or something, or even, I mean, the caricature is that lemonade stand. If you had some kind of weird scheme. I mean, I don't know if you know, Ali Abdaal is one of the biggest YouTubers, the biggest kind of productivity YouTubers around at the moment. He tells a story. He was selling kind of coding and he sold websites when he was 14. He's only about 30 now, but he goes right back to his teenage. And if you've got that kind of story, well, use it. If it's kind of relevant to the bigger picture, it doesn't need to solve your client's problem per se. If it does, all well and good. It doesn't need to, though. But it's part of the thing that makes you you.
Yeah, for most startups, the trust factor is important. And if you tell them your story about how passionate you are about businesses, and you are from the stories, you can learn that you are not just here to earn a quick buck. That could also be a good argument.
There's another thing that you can and should talk about is your failures as well. And we don't, in the Western world at least, we don't talk enough. We kind of fetishize failure a little bit in the sense that there's a shame in it. But you don't get anywhere without failing, really. A little baby that first stands up and falls flat on its backside, he doesn't think, I'm not made up for this walking lark. I'm going to give up walking. It's no good. It's for everybody else. No, they get up and start again. But in the initial falling on their backsides, it's a failure. But no one shames them for it. So why should people shame you if you failed in your first business? Yeah, you didn't get it right. Hey, I've failed in loads of things.
Why do you advise to that? Which effect does it have to your target audience?
Well, it's the kind of thing that makes you human.
Yes, touchable, not someone
relatable,
like a Superman, but a human on the same level.
It's relatable, yeah. It's relatable because life is messy. Every so often, I get a client that says, "I'll do your magic," just as though I'm going to write stuff that comes perfectly out of I wish it did, but it doesn't. And again, that's another thing about stories. The one thing, I mean, I was always very reluctant about telling my story. I'm a writer. I could write about you till with my eyes closed. Writing about myself was a whole nother nightmare. The best piece of advice I ever had, I did some work with a writing coach after my mother died, which led to the writing of my first book. I wrote 20,000 words in 3 weeks. It just kind of went whoosh. Because she said to me, just because you write something down doesn't mean to say you have to publish it. But write it down you must. In its imperfect, in its messy format, it doesn't matter. Because you can edit it afterwards. When it's in your head, you can do nothing with it. It'll just be rattling around forever and ever. I mean, some of the stuff that I wrote down, some will stay on my hard drive forever. But some of it ended up in the book because I got to think, actually, it's not so bad. And even if it comes out, it's got to come out somehow imperfectly. There's a certain amount of vulnerability involved here as well, but there's nothing wrong with that. And self-trust and trusting other people that they're not going to laugh at you, because we think everyone's going to laugh at us if we tell these stories. But 9 times out of 10, that's wrong, because people have experienced the same things, but they don't want to talk about it because they think they're the only person that's ever experienced this stuff. It's not the case.
Is there any other step required, or are we kind of completed the process of storytelling?
I don't think there is. It's just a question of doing it. It's messy. And I think embracing that messiness, once you embrace that messiness, you're halfway there. I've worked in the past with too many perfectionists. Perfectionism in this context, well, most contexts, but this one is particularly bad. Because in creative activities, as a rule, they do not come out perfect first time. Or if they do, you are dead lucky. It's called a first draft for a reason, because there's a constant iteration. I mean, software as well. Do you program something first and it comes out? Of course it doesn't. There's a reason why the word debugging exists, because it doesn't come out perfect. Well, the story is exactly the same. You're debugging your story all the time. Actually, that's not a bad analogy for software people. Just let it come out and debug it afterwards.
Yes, that's a really great advice, to not try to create the first draft as amazing and be very critical about it, but just starting putting something on paper, and then you can choose something from, and that reduce the blockades and stuff.
And don't beat yourself up because it's not perfect.
Yes,
Accept the fact that it's always going to be not perfect.
And maybe in times of AI, it's even good to publish something that is not very polished and perfect.
Oh, completely. Yes, that's a different story. I mean, I use AI all the time, but one thing that the memory hasn't got is you and your experience.
Yes.
It can write about a public figure relatively accurately because all that information is out in the soup that it uses. But it hasn't got your information. It hasn't got your emotions. It hasn't got your skills. It hasn't got anything about you. You can polish something up for you, if you like, or you can rewrite something for you. But it's got to come from you.
Yes, the core. There should be a soul in this text.
That's probably the best word to use. It's a soul. Coming back to why we fall in love with brands, because they have a soul, because they have an identity.
Yeah, I think people are getting used to empty AI text, and they can recognize it pretty quickly. Even if you publish something that is not very well written, not very well thought through, but it's unique to you, then it has much more impact and it stands out.
It is, particularly in kind of short form platforms, things like TikTok or even Instagram as well. Unpolished, straight from your phone videos do far better than professionally produced ones.
Yes. Mike, that was such a pleasure having you on the podcast. Would you like our audience to do something to connect with you on LinkedIn or something? We would add the links in the description.
I mean, yeah, there's my website as well. I've got a couple of books, one called How to Show Off, which is only it's a short little book. It's just a kind of just basically, I say this with the greatest love, how to get over yourself. And also my first book was called Stories That Matter, which is basically just a book about what it's like to run a business, but on our level, not on your Dragon's Den, Shark Tank, gazillionaire type level. It's what happens when people like us run a business. It's been compared to Humans of New York. So I'm taking that.
Wow, impressive.